In 1936 Canada, three sisters were left at the orphanage gate and never seen again. Fog rolled over the narrow streets of Maple Hollow that night. The kind of fog that swallowed lantern light and muffled footsteps. No one saw them arrive, yet at the gate of St. Agnes Orphanage, three small figures waited. Sisters, bound by blood, huddled together against the chill. Their coats were thin, their eyes wide, and they were alone. The caretaker, Sister Beatrice, opened the heavy wooden gate, her lantern casting long shadows across the cobblestones. The sisters offered no names. They said nothing. They only held each other tight, trembling in the October cold. It was the kind of silence that makes the air feel heavier, like it carries a warning. Maple Hollow had seen children abandoned before, but something about these three, Mary and little Clara, felt different. Their arrival wasn't announced. There were no letters, no guardians, no hint of why the three had been left under a foggy sky. Some townsfolk whispered as they passed by. Did someone fear them? Or did someone want them gone? The questions hung in the air, unanswered, as the orphanage doors closed behind them. Inside, the orphanage smelled of damp wood, candle wax, and something faintly metallic. Sister Beatrice led them through the dim hallways, past rooms lined with beds, each one occupied by other children. The sisters clung to each other, their tiny hands white-knuckled. Something about the place, its silence, its shadowed corners, made them instinctively wary. That night, the wind howled against the roof, rattling windows as if trying to warn someone. The sisters slept in a room with three small beds, but none of them rested. Their dreams were restless, filled with shadows that seemed almost alive and whispers they could not understand. Outside, the orphanage gates creaked, and in the fog, shapes seemed to move just beyond the lantern light. The next morning, the sisters were gone. Not one trace remained. Their beds were neatly made, breakfast untouched. Sister Beatrice insisted they had been asleep when she went to check. But the truth gnawed at her. Small footprints that led nowhere, a door left ajar that had been locked, and the faintest scent of smoke that could not be traced. The town awoke to the news. Panic spread quickly through Maple Hollow, a town unused to such mysteries. Parents clutched their children closer. Neighbors locked doors. The fog had lifted, but the fear had only begun to settle. For weeks, the orphanage felt different. Empty in its corners, heavy in its hallways. Those who worked there spoke of strange sounds, laughter that didn't belong to any child, whispers of names that were never called aloud. As days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, theories multiplied. Had the sisters wandered off into the woods? Had someone taken them in the dead of night? Or was it something darker, something the orphanage itself had swallowed, leaving only silence behind? The gate at St. Agnes remained closed after that night, yet everyone remembered how three sisters had appeared and then vanished, leaving only questions and a town forever changed. Maple Hollow was the kind of town that seemed ordinary at first glance. White picket fences, chimneys puffing smoke, and children playing in the streets. But behind the painted windows and tidy gardens, secrets festered like shadows in the corners. The disappearance of Mary and Clara had cracked open a door few wanted to notice. Neighbors whispered behind closed doors, glancing nervously at each other when the orphanage came up. Some swore they had seen strange figures near the gate on foggy nights. Others claimed to hear children laughing where no children should be. And yet, everyone avoided speaking too loudly. Fear of gossip, or fear of something far worse, kept their voices low. Families began to notice odd patterns. Children seemed to vanish from homes, only to be found days later, wandering alone on the outskirts of the town, frightened and unable to remember where they had been. Mary and Clara's disappearance became the shadow that stretched over every missing child afterward. Maple Hollow whispered the same question over and over. Who can we trust? At the heart of these murmurs was the orphanage itself. St. Agnes had always been a quiet place, its gates closed to outsiders. Sister Beatrice maintained order, But there were stories of strange punishments, rooms left locked for days, and children who were never seen again after a single night. Some townsfolk claimed to hear screams carried on the wind, though they were quickly dismissed as imagination or hysteria. A local grocer, Mr. Hensley, remembered the night the sisters arrived. He had seen a carriage disappear into the fog, no driver in sight. He swore he saw eyes staring from the shadows, watching the sisters as if marking them. But no one believed him. Maple Hollow had a way of burying uncomfortable truths beneath the polite routines of daily life. The mayor called meetings. Parents demanded answers. Police combed the town and the surrounding woods, but no evidence was found. No footprints, no notes, no sign of struggle. The only thing left was the unsettling feeling that the town itself was holding its breath, waiting for something unspeakable to be revealed. As the weeks passed, fear hardened into superstition. Children were told never to wander near the orphanage after dark. Windows were barred. Lanterns burned late into the night. The fog, once a natural weather, now seemed like a living thing, thick, suffocating, hiding unseen eyes. Maple Hollow had become a town in hiding, its innocence stripped away by the vanishing of three sisters who were never supposed to disappear. In whispered tones, adults began connecting old stories. Forgotten accidents, sudden illnesses, children sent away for better care that never arrived. A pattern emerged. Maple Hollow had always had secrets, and perhaps Mary, Anne, and Clara had simply stumbled into the oldest and darkest one of all. By winter, the town's fear had solidified into legend. The sisters were spoken of like ghosts, their names a warning for misbehaving children. Don't vanish like Mary, Anne, and Clara. But beneath the cautionary tales, adults knew something deeper had happened, something that left the town forever scarred. The town's silence became almost tangible, as if the streets themselves were trying to swallow the story whole. And yet, for those who dared to look closer, hints of the truth lingered in the corners. A creaking gate at night, a shadow in a window, a small handprint where no child had been. Maple Hollow was a town shrouded in secrets, and some secrets refused to stay buried. Sister Beatrice had been at St. Agnes Orphanage for decades. She walked the hallways with quiet authority, her eyes sharp, her hands steady. The children feared her, but not out of cruelty. There was something in her presence that suggested she knew more than anyone should. Something she never said. The night the three sisters arrived, she had felt it immediately. There was a tremor in the fog, a chill that ran deeper than the October cold. She remembered looking into their wide eyes and sensing the weight of a story the town would never speak aloud. She whispered their names to herself, Mary and Clara, names that would haunt her for years. Sister Beatrice rarely allowed outsiders into the orphanage, but after the girls disappeared, she found herself speaking to the police, though her words were careful, measured. She claimed she had seen nothing, heard nothing. Yet the truth was heavier. She remembered the creak of the gate, the faint footsteps in the hall, and the way the fog seemed to seep into the very walls. Some nights, she would sit alone in the candlelit office, reviewing the ledger of children who had come and gone. Names, dates, small notes scribbled in her handwriting, sometimes records of strange incidents that no one else could explain. Children who vanished, rooms locked without reason, lullabies that carried too far down the hall. The ledger grew thicker each year, a silent confession of things left unspoken. The townsfolk whispered about her, too. Rumors spread that Sister Beatrice had a hand in the disappearances, that she knew the fates of children the police could never trace. But no proof ever surfaced, and she herself never admitted anything. Yet every time she walked the hallways, her eyes lingered on certain corners, as if recalling shadows only she could see. One evening, years after the sisters vanished, she was found muttering to herself near the orphanage gates. Her voice quivered as she repeated a phrase over and over. They were here and then gone. No one could understand what she meant. Some believed it was guilt. Others whispered of knowledge too dark to speak aloud. Whatever it was, It left a mark on anyone who met her gaze. The children at St. Agnes often noticed strange things around Sister Beatrice. A sudden silence that fell when she entered a room. A whispered warning to avoid certain corridors. And sometimes, when she thought no one was watching, her lips would move as if speaking to someone unseen. The three sisters' disappearance had left a shadow over the orphanage, and Sister Beatrice carried it like a burden only she could bear. Even decades later, old residents of Maple Hollow would recall her presence with a shiver. She was the caretaker who knew too much, the woman who had seen what happened to Mary and Clara, and yet had kept it locked away, like the orphanage itself. The truth remained out of reach. But in the cold hallways of St. Agnes, the memory of three sisters lingered, echoing through the walls, carried in Sister Beatrice's haunted eyes, and whispered in the silence that seemed to follow her wherever she walked. The walls of St. Agnes Orphanage held more than paint and plaster. They held echoes. Footsteps that weren't there. Whispers that shouldn't exist. Shadows that stretched longer than the evening light allowed. And somewhere inside, three sisters had disappeared without a trace. Rooms were examined countless times, yet nothing explained their absence. Beds neatly made, toys untouched, no sign of struggle. It was as if the girls had been erased from existence. Some children swore they saw fleeting glimpses of the sisters in corners, just out of reach, their eyes wide and fearful before vanishing into the shadows. Others reported hearing giggles in empty hallways, soft and fleeting, fading before an adult could respond. The orphanage itself seemed alive in its silence. Floorboards groaned under invisible weight. Doors closed on their own. Windows rattled even when the wind lay still. Staff whispered about rooms that weren't on the map or corridors that seemed to shift when no one was looking. Mary and Clara had arrived into a place that swallowed children whole, leaving only the chill behind. At night, the air inside St. Agnes turned heavy, almost suffocating. Lanterns flickered, casting strange shapes on the walls. Sometimes Sister Beatrice would hear small, urgent taps against doors that should have been locked. A chair moving slightly out of place. A shadow slipping past the corner of her eye. It was subtle, almost easy to dismiss, but the repetition was unmistakable. Something in the orphanage resisted the living. The townsfolk began to grow uneasy. Parents of other children reported nightmares, children speaking to unseen figures, and objects moving mysteriously in their homes. The sisters' disappearance had triggered a ripple of fear that spread far beyond the orphanage gates. Maple Hollow had thought it was a safe place. Now, every creak in a floorboard, every whisper of wind against the house, reminded them that safety was an illusion. Investigators came again and again. They checked hidden compartments, locked rooms, basements, and attics. They measured, marked, and documented. Nothing. No footprints. No clues. No explanation. The vanishing wasn't just mysterious. It was impossible. The orphanage had swallowed the girls in its walls, leaving the town to wrestle with a growing unease. Sister Beatrice never spoke of what she thought she saw. But in the quietest moments, when no one was near, she would trace the walls with her fingertips, as if feeling the memory of the sisters trapped inside. The orphanage, with its creaking beams and dim hallways, had become more than a building. It was a tomb of questions, a place where time paused, and three children had ceased to exist. Even decades later, children of the town would dare each other to approach St. Agnes at night. Some swore they could hear footsteps that didn't belong to them, or giggles just beyond reach. Mary and Clara had vanished within the walls, but their presence lingered, a silent warning, a haunting imprint of fear that refused to fade. The orphanage had a heartbeat, and that heartbeat had claimed three innocent lives. Weeks after the sisters vanished, letters began to arrive at St. Agnes. Handwritten, carefully folded, and unsigned, they were addressed to the girls' parents, though no one knew who had written them. The envelopes carried a faint scent of smoke and candle wax, as if they had been penned in the dim light of a hidden room. The first letter was cryptic. They are safe for now, but do not look for them here. The words were elegant, almost pleading, yet chilling. Sister Beatrice read it aloud to the staff, her hands shaking. No one knew what to make of it. The police dismissed the letters as hoaxes, but something about the ink, the paper, and the precise handwriting suggested someone, or something, knew more than they let on. Days later, another envelope arrived, smaller, more urgent. They listen. They move in the walls. Speak not, for silence is their ally. A chill ran through everyone who read it. Was it a warning? A confession? Or merely the mind of someone too unhinged to be taken seriously? Yet the handwriting matched the first letter perfectly. The fear it carried was real. The letters never stopped. Each one offered fragments, glimpses into a shadowed world that the town could not comprehend. Do not cry for them. They are part of the silence now. The gate opens only once more, and then it closes forever. Each message was a puzzle piece, yet none of the pieces formed a complete picture. Parents of the girls received nothing. Their grief was raw, punctuated by the anger of unanswered questions. The letters circulated within the orphanage, read in hushed tones by staff who dared not discuss them outside the walls. Each envelope carried an unshakable sense of dread, as if whoever wrote them was always watching, always waiting. Town rumors swirled around the letters. Some believed a secret society had taken the girls, using the orphanage as a trap. Others whispered of supernatural forces, of spirits that claimed children who were left alone in the fog. Maple Hollow, already tense from the girls' disappearance, began to see shadows in every corner. The letters were proof that the mystery wasn't finished. It had only begun. By winter, the letters became more personal, almost intimate. They hinted at knowledge no outsider should have. Clara hides in the light and listens in the dark. Mary remembers nothing. The words were fragments of lives no one could see, teasing the townsfolk with truths they could never fully grasp. Sister Beatrice kept each one in a locked drawer, though she sometimes lingered, rereading them when the orphanage was quiet, the candlelight flickering across her pale face. No matter how carefully the authorities searched, no cinder was ever found. No footprints led to the mailbox. No handwriting matched anyone in the town. The letters existed in a liminal space, neither entirely real nor entirely imagined. And yet, they left an undeniable mark. Maple Hollow could no longer pretend that the sisters' disappearance was a simple tragedy. It was a mystery that reached into the unseen corners of the town, twisting the familiar streets into something unrecognizable. Every envelope, every phrase, every subtle threat reminded the people of Maple Hollow of one terrible truth. The sisters were gone, and the town would never hold the answers. It was a night like no other. The wind howled through Maple Hollow, rattling windows and tearing branches from trees. Rain slammed against the orphanage roof, drumming a relentless rhythm that seemed almost alive. Inside St. Agnes, the air was heavy with tension, thick with the memory of the missing sisters. The storm struck without warning. Lightning illuminated the hallways in sharp, fleeting flashes, revealing the long shadows of empty beds. Thunder rolled through the building, vibrating through the floorboards as if warning the children of something unseen. Sister Beatrice moved quickly from room to room, checking on the remaining children, but her heart was elsewhere, on the girls who had vanished months before. A scream cut through the storm, echoing down the halls. It wasn't from the current residents. It was a sound that seemed to come from the very walls, a small, high-pitched cry that made the hair on the back of the neck stand up. Sister Beatrice froze, clutching her lantern, the flames flickering violently in the drafts of wind. For a moment, the orphanage felt alive, as if it breathed with a will of its own. Doors slammed and windows rattled as if pushed by invisible hands. Candles guttered, casting the hallways in darkness. Footsteps, light, rapid, almost floating, echoed above the thunder. The remaining children huddled under blankets, whispering prayers they barely understood. The storm outside seemed to mirror the storm within, and the orphanage itself became a vessel for the unspeakable. In the attic, Sister Beatrice discovered a small, forgotten room. Its door had been hidden behind stacked crates, unnoticed for years. Inside, the air was damp, and the floorboards creaked under her weight. But it was the faint marks on the walls, small handprints smeared in dust, that made her blood run cold. 3 sets of prints, at the height of children, leading to the corner where the floorboards were warped as if something, or someone, had disappeared into them. The storm raged on. Lightning struck the bell tower, sending splinters of wood crashing into the orphanage below. The children screamed, some of them fainting in fear. Sister Beatrice held them close, murmuring words of comfort she barely felt herself. She knew, deep down, that the storm had not caused the vanishings. It had revealed them. The orphanage was alive in ways no one could explain, and the sisters had been part of its heartbeat all along. When dawn finally arrived, the storm had passed. The town surveyed the damage: broken windows, fallen trees, flooded streets. But inside St. Agnes, the air remained thick, heavy with memory. The handprints in the hidden room were gone, wiped clean as if the storm had claimed them too. Yet the feeling lingered, an oppressive reminder that the orphanage was not merely a building. It was a vault holding secrets, whispers, and perhaps the vanished sisters themselves. Maple Hollow had survived the storm, but St. Agnes, orphanage of shadows and lost children, remained silent, watching, waiting. The disappearance of Mary, and Clara had shaken Maple Hollow to its core. Parents, neighbors, and police banded together, forming search parties to comb the town, the surrounding woods, and even abandoned cabins at the outskirts. Lanterns swung in the dark, illuminating fog-drenched trees. Every crackle of leaves underfoot sent hearts racing. Days turned into nights, and nights into weeks. The searchers found nothing. No footprints, no discarded toys, no signs of struggle. The girls seemed to have vanished into thin air. Even the rivers, streams, and old wells were checked. Yet the water reflected only the anxious faces of those searching, not the missing children. The townsfolk's frustration grew into desperation. Families begged authorities for answers. Rumors spread that the orphanage had hidden passageways, secret doors, or tunnels beneath its foundations. Some claimed to have glimpsed faint lights or shadows moving where no children should be. Others whispered that the orphanage itself had swallowed the sisters, hiding them in a place beyond reach. Police interviewed staff, neighbors, and passers-by. Everyone who had been near the orphanage that night was questioned. Sister Beatrice recounted what she remembered: the arrival of the sisters, the strange noises, the creaking of the gates. But her story offered no tangible leads. The investigation reached dead end after dead end. Every clue dissolved into confusion. Every lead evaporated into uncertainty. Local children spoke in hushed tones about seeing the sisters in fleeting moments, behind windows, just at the edge of vision. They would vanish when approached. Some adults dismissed these claims as imagination fueled by fear and legend. Others believed the children, wondering if the sisters were trapped somewhere, caught between worlds, unable to leave the walls of St. Agnes. Even search dogs failed to track them. The creatures barked, sniffed, and growled at nothing, their behavior unsettling everyone present. It was as if the girls' scent had evaporated, leaving no trail, no proof, only the haunting emptiness of the orphanage and its foggy surroundings. Months passed. The search parties disbanded, leaving families broken and the town tense with unanswered questions. Maple Hollow grew quieter. Children were no longer allowed near the gates after dark. Adults avoided discussing the orphanage. The town had survived the disappearance, but it carried the weight of 3 missing lives in every shadowed alley and foggy street. Yet the mystery endured. Despite the dead ends, the searchers' efforts, and the passing of seasons, a single truth remained. Mary, and Clara were gone, and no human method could explain their absence. Their disappearance became a scar on the town, a wound that refused to heal, leaving Maple Hollow forever caught between fear, grief, and the silent question: what really happened behind the walls of St. Agnes? Behind St. Agnes Orphanage lay a small playground, overgrown with weeds and rusted swings. Once it had been a place of laughter, of small hands gripping wooden bars and tiny feet racing across soft earth. But after the sisters vanished, it became silent. The air around it seemed heavier, as if carrying the weight of memories it could not release. Children dared each other to step near it, but few ever lingered. The swings set creaked in the wind, moving as though pushed by invisible hands. Sometimes, faint giggles could be heard, echoing softly through the fog. Others swore they saw 3 small figures moving just beyond the tall grass, watching, always watching. And then, when approached, they would vanish, leaving nothing but the chill of the autumn air. Town elders avoided the playground altogether. Parents warned their children not to go near it after dark. Some claimed that when the sisters disappeared, the playground became a boundary between the living and something else, a place where the orphanage's shadows spilled into the world. Every rusted chain and cracked wooden plank carried the echo of the girls' last footsteps. Occasionally, a caretaker or a brave local would leave small toys or flowers by the swings, hoping to comfort the spirits they imagined were trapped there. Within hours, the gifts were gone, whether taken by someone or something no one could say. The playground had become a silent testament, a place where absence was felt more sharply than presence, and whispers carried the questions the town dared not voice. Even during the day, the playground seemed to move in subtle ways. Shadows shifted without cause, leaves rustled when the wind was still, and faint impressions of small footprints appeared in the dirt, only to disappear moments later. Those who noticed these signs felt a shiver run down their spine. The sisters had not simply vanished. It was as if the orphanage had left a fragment of them behind, a permanent echo etched into the very earth. Stories began circulating among the townsfolk. Some claimed the sisters played there in secret at night, giggling softly before retreating into the orphanage walls. Others whispered of a spectral figure, a matron or guardian, watching over the playground, ensuring the children remained bound to the orphanage forever. No one could prove these tales, yet no one truly dared to challenge them either. The playground became a symbol of Maple Hollow's unspoken fear. It was a place of memory, of absence, and of questions that refused to be answered. And in every rusting swing and forgotten slide, the whispers of Mary and Clara remained, a haunting reminder that some mysteries never fade. They only linger, waiting for someone brave or foolish enough to notice. Decades passed. The orphanage changed hands, the town evolved, and Maple Hollow tried to bury its past. But one rainy afternoon, a worker renovating St. Agnes stumbled upon a hidden compartment behind a crumbling wall in the attic. Inside was a dusty, leather-bound diary. Its pages were brittle, ink faded, but the words inside were shocking. The diary belonged to a young girl who had lived at St. Agnes shortly before Mary and Clara arrived. She wrote of strange noises in the hallways, shadows moving independently, and children disappearing without explanation. Her entries became more frantic over time, speaking of voices in the walls, doors that led nowhere, and figures she could not name. Figures that whispered to the sisters. One entry chilled the town decades later. 3 of them came to us. I watched them huddle by the gate. I wanted to help, but the walls, they reach for them. They take them. I hear their names every night. Mary, Clara. The diary suggested that the orphanage itself was a living entity, a predator of sorts, feeding on the innocence of the children who entered its gates. The writer hinted at attempts to warn the sisters, to guide them to safety, but all efforts were futile. The orphanage's grip was too strong. Historians and paranormal investigators examined the diary, debating its authenticity. Could a building really possess such malevolent intent? Or was it the imagination of a frightened child? Yet certain details, dates, events, even the layout of the orphanage matched historical records. Some passages were so precise that they confirmed parts of the story never publicized. The diary also suggested a connection to the letters that had arrived after the disappearance. Some passages referenced cryptic messages, warnings, and signs only visible to those attuned to the orphanage's presence. The implication was terrifying. The sisters may have been aware of their fate and trapped within the walls by forces beyond comprehension. Maple Hollow reacted with disbelief and fear. For many, the diary was proof that the town's darkest secret was real. The sisters' disappearance wasn't merely a tragic mystery. It was a living, breathing horror. Researchers and townsfolk alike reported strange occurrences in the orphanage following the diary's discovery. Flickering lights, sudden cold drafts, and whispers echoing from empty rooms. Yet the diary left more questions than answers. Where exactly had the sisters gone? Were they still trapped, or had time claimed them entirely? No one knew. All that remained was the haunting record of their last moments before they vanished, and the terrifying suggestion that St. Agnes had always been more than a building. It had been a trap, a silent predator, and a keeper of lost souls. The discovery of the diary ensured one thing. Mary, Anne, and Clara would never be forgotten in the shadow of St. Agnes would linger over Maple Hollow forever. Maple Hollow never returned to the life it once knew. The disappearance of Mary, Anne, and Clara left a scar that decades could not heal. Streets that were once lively became quiet after dusk. Children no longer played near the orphanage. Even the fog that had once seemed harmless now carried the weight of fear. Families moved away. New residents arrived, unaware of the past, only to feel the subtle tension in the town's air. Windows seemed to watch, doors creaked without wind, and locals whispered of shadows glimpsed in alleyways. St. Agnes Orphanage stood at the edge of the town like a silent sentinel, its gates closed, yet somehow always present in the corner of one's eye. Maple Hollow's history became defined by absence. School records noted fewer children. Town meetings often revolve around missing persons or unexplained phenomena. The streets seemed smaller, the nights longer, as though the town itself had been shrunk by grief and fear. Even when adults tried to tell stories to children, the words faltered. How do you explain something that defies explanation? For generations, the memory of the sisters lingered. Parents whispered warnings, "Stay away from the orphanage. Don't wander into the fog." Ghost stories merged with real fear. Children grew up hearing tales of shadows that moved in giggles in empty halls. Mary, Anne, and Clara became more than missing girls. They were symbols of something the town could not face, an unresolved wound that shaped every corner of Maple Hollow. Sister Beatrice eventually passed away, carrying the secret to her grave. But the orphanage remained, its walls seemingly absorbing every fear, every loss, every whispered name. Those who visited spoke of the heavy air, the way the building seemed to watch, and the subtle sense that something was always just out of reach, waiting to be seen. Even today, when the fog rolls in over Maple Hollow, locals pause. Lanterns flicker in the distance, shadows appear where none should exist, and the wind carries faint laughter. The town may have moved on in some ways, but the disappearance of the three sisters left a permanent mark. Maple Hollow had learned a hard lesson. Some mysteries never end. Some horrors linger in silence, waiting, watching, refusing to be forgotten. And somewhere, behind the closed gates of St. Agnes, the whispers continue.